Now we will focus on the internal aspect of skull, or we can see that the interior of the base of the skull. So interior of the base of the skull is naturally divided into the three fossa: the anterior cranial fossa, middle cranial fossa, and posterior cranial fossa. As you can see that each fossa is arranged at different level. Most deepest fossa is posterior cranial fossa, and the most or shallowest fossa is interior cranial fossa. Anterior cranial fossa is bounded anteriorly by the frontal bone, posteriorly by this. This is lesser wing of sphenoid. This is lesser wing of sphenoid. This lesser wing of sphenoid has free border, which is known as sphenoid crust. This is anterior clinoid process. This is the anterior margin of the sulcus chiasmaticus, which is named as limbus of sphenoid. So the anterior boundary is formed by frontal bone, posteriorly by three sphenoid crust, anterior glenoid process, limbus of sphenoid, glenoid process is too difficult, sphenoid crust. Now we will see the floor. The floor is formed by the orbital part of frontal bone and ethmoid bone. So now we will discuss the feature of the anterior cranial fossa. Anterior cranial fossa, there is firstly you find the frontal crest. This is frontal crest. Frontal crest is essential for the attachment of the falx cerebri. Falx cerebri. This is immediately posterior to the frontal crest. There is a foramen which is named as foramina cecum. This is foramina cecum. This is foramina cecum. This is foramina cecum. Immediately posterior to the foramina cecum, a thick median ridge of bone projects superiorly from the ethmoid bone. This is known as crista gyli. Crista gyli is also essential for the attachment of falx cerebri. On each side of the crista gyli, we will find this sieve-like plates, which is known as cribriform plate. Cribriform plate supports the olfactory bulb over here, through which the olfactory nerve descend or pass towards the nasal mucosa. If you see the cribriform plate more deeply, you will find this posterior ethmoidal foramen and anterior ethmoidal foramen. This posterior anterior ethmoidal foramen first opens into the nasal cavity, then in the orbit, like there. This is anterior ethmoidal foramen and this is posterior ethmoidal foramen. On the anterior surface, you will find these impressions, which is especially formed by the frontal lobe of cerebral hemisphere. After discussing the anterior cerebral anterior cranial fossa, now we'll study the middle cranial fossa. The anterior boundary of middle cranial fossa is formed by this crust, sphenoid crust, anterior clinoid process. This is the limbus of sphenoid, anterior clinoid and sphenoid crest. And posteriorly, it is bounded by the pitris part of temporal bone, superior border. This is, and dorsum silli. This is dorsum silli. This is dorsum silli. This is pitris part of temporal bone. So this is middle cranial fossa. The floor of middle cranial fossa is formed by greater wing of sphenoid, body of sphenoid, squamous part of temporal bone, and anterior surface of the pitris part of the temporal bone. This whole things are also for this side, so it's bilaterally same. Now we will see the features of the middle cranial fossa. First of all, you will see this sulcus over here, which I color with purple, so it distinguishes from other part of the skull. So this is the sulcus chiasmaticus. Sulcus chiasmaticus extended right and left. Right and left. So it lodges optic chiasma. Each side of the sulcus chiasmaticus there is a canal called optic canal. This is optic canal, which I will show you just a little bit. This is optic canal. It opens into the orbit. This is the anterior clinoid process. The medial end of the lesser wing curves medially and posteriorly to form anterior clinoid process. This process serves as for the attachment of tentorium cerebelli. You know the tentorium cerebelli separates the cerebellum from cerebral hemispheres, and the falx cerebri separates two cerebral hemispheres. Now we know that this is the sulcus chiasmaticus. This is this purple one, sulcus chiasmaticus, optic canal, anterior clinoid process. There is a just posterior to the sulcus chiasmaticus, there is a unique bone formation of the body of the sphenoid, which is known as stilla turcica. This stilla turcica is consists of four parts. This black one is tuberculum silli, hypophyseal fossa. If you see from this is a fossa, hypophyseal fossa, dorsum silli, and posterior clinoid processes. Just posterior to the sulcus chiasmaticus, there is a bony extension which is named as tuberculum silli, and just posterior to the tuberculum silli, there is a deep depression which is named as hypophyseal fossa. This hypophyseal fossa is very important because it lodges the pituitary gland, and just posterior to the hypophyseal fossa there is a curved or square bony projection which is named as dorsum silli. The superior angles of the dorsum silli have two tubercles. One is this and one is this. This and this. This is called posterior clinoid process. It also gives attachment to the tentorium cerebelli. On the each side of the greater wing of sphenoid, you will find a crescent of four tubercle. You know, crescent is a crescent. What is crescent? This is superior. First of all, I will say that there is a crescent of four foramen. Sorry, this is a crescent of four foramen. There is superior orbital fissure. This is a superior orbital fissure. This is a superior orbital fissure. It opens into the orbital, just like this. Wait. This is superior orbital fissure. This is superior orbital fissure, which is a slit-like opening between lesser wing of sphenoid and greater wing of sphenoid. At the medial end of the superior orbital fissure, there is a foramen which is named as foramina rotundum. This foramina rotundum opens into the pterygopalatine fossa. Wait, here you go. This is pterygopalatine fossa. So this foramina rotundum opens into the pterygopalatine fossa. Just posterior lateral to the foramina rotundum, there is another foramen name is foramina ovale. This is open to the foramina ovale. This is foramina ovale. Foramina ovale. Then here we have discussed that foramina ovale lie just lateral to the lateral pterygoid plate. Foramina ovale. This foramen is known as foramina spinosum. This is lie just posterior lateral to the foramen ovale. This is foramina spinosum. This is spinosphenoid. Stellar process. Another foramen which is named as foramen lacerum. This is foramen lacerum. It lies between the apex of the vitreous part of temporal bone and greater wing of sphenoid. There is a part which is named as tegmen tympani. It is a thin plate extension of the vitreous part of temporal bone and lie adjacent to the squamous part of temporal bone. It forms the roof over the mastoid process and tympanic part of temporal bone and Eustachian canal or pituitary canal. It is essential because the infection in the tympanic cavity does not infect the temporal lobe of cerebral hemisphere. So our last fossa is posterior cranial fossa. Its interior boundary is formed by the superior border of the vitreous part of temporal bone, and posteriorly is the squamous part of occipital bone. This squamous part of occipital bone. So now we'll discuss the features of the posterior cranial fossa. This is the clivus. This is the clivus. Clivus is the slopy surface in front of the foramen magnum. This is here the brainstem lie. Here is midbrain, pons, medulla. So there are petrous sinus over here. The inferior petrous sinus, this black one is inferior petrous sinus, and this is the superior petrous sinus. There are grooves. The inferior petrous sinus lies lateral to the clivus and medial to the petrous part of temporal bone. This groove is also known as pterooccipital fissure. The superior petrosal sinus run backward along the upper border of the petrous bone. This black one is this. It runs backward along the upper border of petrous bone in a narrow groove and drain into the sigmoid sinus. Here there is not clearly, but on this side this sigmoid sinus is very clearly. Later I will discuss this sigmoid sinus. This superior petrous sinus run backward and drain into the sigmoid sinus. Here is the internal occipital protuberance. Internal occipital protuberance, it lies opposite to the external occipital protuberance. This external occipital protuberance. Here is the internal occipital crest, which extends from the internal occipital protuberance downward in the medial plane towards the foramen magnum. This. On each side of the internal occipital crust, there is deep fossa which lodge the cerebellar hemispheres. Cerebellar hemispheres are separated from each other by a falx cerebelli, like this. On each side of the internal occipital protuberance, there is a transverse sigmoid sinus. The transverse sigmoid sinus sweeps around and run over the mastoid part of the temporal bone. This is mastoid part of temporal bone, and here it becomes the sigmoid sinus. This is the foramen magnum, which occupies the central area of the floor of the posterior cranial fossa. There is the hypoglossal canal, which lies in the anterior lateral border of the foramina magnum. This is, wait, I will show you this. This is anterior lateral border of the foramina magnum. So if I this, it will open like this, superior to the condyle of, superior to the occiput. So this is the hypoglossal canal, which hypoglossal nerve pass laterally. Here is the internal equitus meatus. This is internal equitus meatus. It's lies just superior to the, what is this? Sorry, I will not discuss this. So first discuss this. This is jugular foramen. Jugular foramen is present at the base of the pitous part of the temporal bone. This is the base. If you follow this, this opens into the, wait. So if you follow the jugular foramen, it opens into the jugular foramen, but in the inferior part of the skull. So our last foramen is internal equitus meatus, which lies just above the jugular foramen. That's it. Thank you.